Want to thank Serve Pro of Beechwood, our newest sponsor, and Jack Coslin, the owner. They serve all of Northeast Ohio, not just Beechwood. They specialize in disaster cleanup that leaves your home or office like new, like it never happened. Flood and water damage, fire, mold, and they say even blood and guts. Not just any Serve Pro. Seek out Serve Pro of Beechwood. That's Serve Pro Beechwood, Shaker Heights, ClevelandHeights.com, 216-464-4498. Operated by a former All-State wrestler from Beechwood, we love Serve Pro of Beechwood. Blood Time, the podcast that speaks to the bond, the emotion between coach and athlete at the interscholastic and intercollegiate level. Each interview, each segment will reveal that bond and what was learned, how they were transformed, and what each athlete took to the world at large from that transformation. These stories will warm your heart and astound you altogether. Submitted for your approval. Now it is blood time. Hey guys, Coach Cimoroni here. It's blood time. I want to thank my last guest, Gabriel Dean, two-time NCAA champion, three-time finalist, and current assistant wrestling coach at Cornell University. Amazing guy, very candid, heartfelt, and really opened up about how, he disappointed his dad as the guy after he lost his final match in college to Bo Nickel, 4-3, going after his third NCAA title. Very deeply disappointing, but he turned inward, and it took his dad and himself and his brother to bring him out of it. And today he feels he's a better man. And that self-reflection is what this is all about. Amazing interview, terrific guy, and we wish him the best. Today I have my dearest friend in the world, my brother, a guy that I love dearly and respect immensely, but also, too, a guy that has a great viewpoint that I think is going to be rare, and I hope to be able to entice him to bring that rare viewpoint out today. Dr. Scott Peters. Welcome, Woo-hoo! Scott. What's happening, baby? How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Nice to be here.
We're in the middle of coming out of the COVID-19 crisis, and you are masked up as a good doctor would be. I am not. Maybe I should be. Maybe you're going to convince me to be.
This was like a mouse turned into a monster.
Of course.
Right? I mean, the coronavirus has been forever implicated as being the cause of the common cold.
Yeah.
Right? And so, it would be very infectious since all of us have a common cold at least once or twice a year,
Of course. Sure.
If all of a sudden it's got this new added feature where it destroys your lungs.
Yes.
And you can't breathe. Well, okay, right. So now you're talking about a whole different animal. So anyways, but I think we are going to come out of it. I think the fact that some people will come out aggressively, meaning they're going to forego all restrictions, spatial distancing, social distancing, whatever you want to call it, and masks and whatever, but other people will still hang on to it for however long. That's going to help it die out still.
Gotcha.
Right? Because there still will be less people blowing it around.
Gotcha.
So anyways, I look forward to that very much so. I just feel like I have to be an example.
Of course.
Because
you're a medical professional, and I appreciate that and respect that. No matter what, it's going to be complex, and it will be chaotic to some, and there's going to be far-reaching consequences that we're going to have to deal with.
There will.
Based on this quarantine.
God willing, there won't be a lot of them.
Hopefully not.
The numbers will be diminishing, and this thing will fade away, and it'll be a faded memory before we know it.
Well, I know we could do an entire show on this. And
we could,
I appreciate your intellect, and I also appreciate your pragmatism and also your common sense, and we need more of that. And Scott, one of the things, those are some of the three things I love about you. But this is a wrestling, this is a sports, this is an inspirational podcast. So I want to get to those stories, and I've known you since you were a young man, and I coached you when you were a young man. But I still look at you sometimes with those beautiful eyes, and I say, see that young man.
All right.
And I know the wrestling room and the athletic fields, but particularly the wrestling room, inspired you to be the man you are today in so many ways. I want you to share some of those stories of what if there were transformative moments or one moment that created this physician, this religious leader, this father, this husband that I see in front of me today.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a broad question. Well, in 1966...
You're capable. And do not start with, I brushed my teeth today and comb my hair.
1966 when I had my
when
first
you were born.
birthday, right?
Exactly right. Yes.
So, no, of course, the sport of wrestling is still woven in the fabric that I call me, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's your DNA.
You can't go a day in my house without hearing something about wrestling.
Is that true, Maverick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yesterday we had some. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
So, it gets in your blood, it gets in your cells, and it's
Sure.
part of you. And so I think that the relationship that you have with your coaches and the relationship that you have with your fellow wrestlers, you don't realize it when it's happening.
Right.
But it is absolutely shaping you as a future person.
Of course.
My days of wrestling started, and you and I have talked about it in the past, started at a place called the Pin Squad.
Right.
Quickly, we were taken to a different program called Longwood, which was one of the,
Well, that was iconic.
Right.
Run by some of the most iconic coaches ever.
Right. One of the most storied youth programs in the country, for sure. And so there I was coached by Graham Coghill and Ed Gobain.
Right.
And both, phenomenal guys, phenomenal coaches. I still hold them very dear in my heart, to this day. I think
and created a dynasty at Chanel, the Firebirds, many state championships, many state championship teams. So
they did, and it's interesting. I learned something not all that long ago. I consider myself somewhat of a wrestling historian, certainly
no question.
Lightweights, throughout the ages, and I saw somewhere the list of state champions from Chanel. Now Chanel, the school was disbanded, the diocese let it go, but
yeah.
However that works, I'm not sure.
Well, it's all money based.
That was a very sad day for a
Sure.
Jewish kid like me who grew up, working
admiring
out
those
at Chanel.
Catholic boys over in Bedford, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, we used to train at Chanel.
Sure.
And we trained at Chanel and at St. Pius when we were younger, and so that place, is very near and dear to me. But when you're coached by men like that,
yes.
So then you learn a lot about yourself and you learn a lot about life.
Right.
I didn't know what tough was until I was in a room with Graham Coghill.
Yeah.
And so when I was saying before that I saw this list of all their state champions. And when I was at Longwood,
yep.
Okay, I didn't know how to wrestle yet. I was just in my second or third year.
Mm-hmm.
And this room was just, packed with studs.
Sure.
The list is long and distinguished. Among the names were Jeff Coghill, Dave Mariola, John
Right.
Moore.
Right.
And there was also somebody, Carl Jager.
Sure.
And there were kids that were just very average that I thought were superstars because, I could go there with a pocket full of money and I couldn't buy a takedown in that room.
Yeah, there you
right?
go.
And I used to stay away from Jeff Coghill like he was the plague, like he was the
Like
coronavirus, And so even
COVID-19, get away from me.
I really respected him and even looked up to him. We were the same age, but I
Sure.
looked up to him because he was such a colorful personality. He was such a
charismatic guy.
and he was a very strong leader.
Right.
And but I when it came time for wrestling and takedowns, he was only 5 pounds heavier than me, but I made sure that 5 pounds kept us apart.
Exactly.
And so, but there was another kid in the room that I didn't hear much about. He didn't get a whole lot of attention.
Right.
And I wanted to like him and I would try to talk to him, but he would never talk to me. Instead, he would just give me a beating.
Okay.
And his name was John Ryba.
Oh boy.
And John goes on to become my nemesis.
Yes.
Right. So I lost to him, every day in practice. Somehow he could find me.
Right.
But he didn't have the same, the crown on his head that Jeff Coghill did. And it might be because Jeff probably won nationals several times. And I don't even know if John wrestled in the summer. I never really saw him in the summer, but I never beat Ryba. Ryba beat me in a JV match.
Okay.
Like 10-3.
Yeah.
And then we wrestled as juniors, and he beat me 1-0, and then he beat me 5-1, I think, in the section.
So he had your number, and you were talking about the actual list of guys.
Right. So I just recently found that he was their first state champion.
It's wild.
I mean, I thought that he came from Graham Coghill and Ed Goving.
Right.
I
They
thought
had
there was
many
this
state
long,
champs,
right,
yeah.
that had many. He
Sure.
started the whole ball rolling.
That's fantastic.
Right, it really is. And,
Yeah.
I was more proud of him. I don't see John too much anymore.
Right.
But
I see his brother Mike.
I would run into him at tournaments from time to time. And
Yeah.
so, he had a son that was a state champ.
Okay.
And when I saw that this kid made states, I was so excited
Okay.
for him. And then he won it. He was not a favorite to win it. I mean,
Right.
I don't know where Brakeman had him, but, he was somewhere down, maybe in the top 10 still, but not near the top.
Yeah.
And so I was very proud of him. And when I saw that he was their first state champ, and he was a 2-timer and
Right.
probably should have been a 3-timer.
Yeah.
He got beat out by Carl Jager our sophomore year.
Wow.
And he beat Jager out all year, except for the dual meet against us. So I had a chance to lose to Jager also. Actually, it wasn't a dual meet. It was a quad. And
you love Chanel.
Right. And so, listen, if I can spread joy to everybody else, it comes by me throwing a match.
That entire Catholic community was just loving that
right,
little Jew from Beachwood.
They did. And so, but I felt it was my duty to build their esteem and,
of course,
and
it
help
was.
them develop,
Yes, you did it well. Absolutely.
And so, but, so RIBA, I never beat John, but my senior year, I was, my goal was to cut down to 12.
Okay.
And I started the year at 32.
Yeah.
So that was 4 weight classes, 32,
Yeah,
26.
that's not going to happen.
Right. So, and Coach I gave me my high school coach,
Coach
Dominic
Cimoroni,
right?
Yeah.
Who you interviewed a few weeks ago.
Beautiful interview. Yeah.
So he gave me a date that I had to be at a certain weight by, and he weighed me in on that day, and I missed by like 2.5 pounds, and he said, "Okay, you're going 19."
Yeah.
And it was a very traumatic day for me because I had this unanswered question,
Yeah. Could I do that?
Can I beat Ryben? I really felt my senior year I could. I did have the good fortune. He and I both made the East All-Star team at the end of the season. So
Okay.
I got to work out with them that whole week and actually for 2 days.
Yeah.
And I got the only takedown between us.
Okay.
And we could both pretty much ride each other out. And so
Okay.
we're pretty even, but I felt like I finally avenged it. And but he was such a gritty, tough kid.
Sure.
And so he's one of the great unsung superstars as far as I'm concerned in high school wrestling in Ohio.
Yes.
But he was a beast.
So what did you learn from Coghill and that crew? What was the takeaway?
I really think that what I came away with from them was that if you have a work ethic,
Yes.
that can change you.
Gotcha.
That alone can change you.
Gotcha.
And your work ethic will make you tougher.
Yes.
So, I've translated that in my coaching days. I've translated that to mean that competence breeds confidence.
Well said.
Right? And so competence in your technique and competence in your training
Yes.
gives you
the confidence for that.
Yeah, exactly. And
Sure.
so, they're two very important pieces. I don't know that you could put one above the other.
Well, you start to love yourself more by knowing that you can put yourself through the paces, and then you respect yourself.
I was going to say, you definitely start to respect yourself.
Yeah.
I would like to think that we love ourselves always anyways.
Intrinsically, sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of self-loathing out there.
There could be.
Yeah.
That's not been a problem with me.
I understand. Me either.
So, but yeah, so, in the Longwood room, you learned, number one, I learned how to take a beating.
Of course.
Right. And how to keep coming back.
Right.
Because I think I don't know many other people that made it through there that got beat up as badly as I did.
That's right.
And so, it's just, it's an interesting process.
Well, I have this saying, and it's one of the thought of the days: iron through fire makes steel. Embrace the fire. You must have embraced the fire from the Firebirds. So.
Oh, yeah, well, I definitely felt it.
Yeah, I got you. You felt the fire.
I think I did embrace it. I think I felt like if I could close the gap on any of them, I could see that growth. And I always look for those kinds of things.
That's such an important thing, closing the gap.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because
so everything's baby steps, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be aware of your surroundings, and you have to know how you're progressing through those circumstances. And so, I always felt like I was getting better. And one of the great moments I had was we wrestled Chanel. Chanel was at our sectionals, and it was at home at Beechwood.
Sure.
And so I wrestled Ryba in the finals.
Okay.
And I remember the whole first period, I heard the fans screaming, watch the headlock, watch the headlock, watch the headlock. I'm like, what, do they think I only have a headlock? But later I was thinking it's so flattering.
Yes.
Because they know I have something dangerous.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I wish I believed in that headlock as much because I never tried to headlock Ryball, though he was,
Well, it's like the Jordan rules, right? I'm not going to have Jordan beat me. That's the Detroit Pistons had that.
I hear. Right.
So,
well, good luck with that one too.
Exactly right. Well, they actually beat him with that, but then the next year they didn't because Jordan said screw that. And you know what Jordan did? He lifted all that summer. He says, I'm going to take the beating. He says that's the reason.
He got bigger and stronger.
Yeah, he got bigger and stronger. He couldn't take the beating because they put the bad boys on him. Mm-hmm. Same thing with what you're talking about. You had that atom bomb, if you will.
So that was very important to me. But I think, as far as developing as a person, I had you were my first high school coach. Right?
Yeah, I was.
Because you were my JV coach.
I was, yeah.
And so as a freshman, I was JV. And, it's funny, I was thinking, what lessons did I come away with from you? Okay. And there were some, and many more actually when I was your assistant coach later in life.
Yes, right.
I learned a lot more in those circumstances.
Of course.
But I
only had you for a cup of coffee.
I came to the conclusion that you were the worst coach I ever had.
Fair enough. I love it.
And let me explain that.
Okay.
I lost 2 JV matches my freshman year.
Sure.
One was against Ryba, and one was against Coach I's son, which was a very emotional thing for me.
Very, yes.
Because I love Coach I worship Coach I, and here I was going into this match knowing that he wanted me to lose this match because it was against his son. He never said that, of course. But that was what was going through my head.
Yeah, emotional all the way around.
Right, and so you know how the match ended.
Yes,
you had to send 2 guys out to pick me up and carry me off the mat because I could not pull myself up.
Right.
Right. So I ended up getting pinned. That was the last time I ever got pinned.
Right.
I came away with the idea that you must be the worst coach I ever had because I only wrestled 2 tough kids that year, right. Ryba and Mike Imarino, and both of them whipped me. Right. So you didn't do much for me.
I'll take that. I'll take that criticism, and you know what? I'm okay with that.
But I did love having you in the room, and I got a lot of pleasure out of watching you wrestle with some of our other guys.
Yes. I'll
never forget the time that you gave Tommy Weiss a black eye doing a somersault in the middle of the match, right? So
that was fantastic, and he kept looking in the mirror, saying, "My beautiful face."
Right. He's a perfect face. You ruined my perfect face.
Oh, Tommy Weiss. God bless him.
Yeah. So, but anyways, I came to the high school. When I was in 8th grade. There were 2 of us that were good wrestlers, and it was myself and Eric Freed.
Yeah.
Who's also he's an oral maxillofacial surgeon now.
Done very well.
And so, very proud of him.
Yes.
And so Eric and I were invited to a high school practice when we were in 8th grade. And I was in awe. Tommy, who was a 3-time state placer and should have been a state champ. And you had David Sternberg, who was a 2-time state champ. Yes. And you had Butch Lapsley and Michael Goldberg and Jeff Tolan and the Kravitzes. And, you just had this incredible room. Right. And so, and Stu Smiley was there then. And so, so it was 3rd in the state. So I walked into that place and literally I couldn't get my jaw off the floor.
Right.
And all I wanted to do was be one of Coach I's boys.
Right.
I wanted to be his man.
Yes. There
was no question that I had a certain amount of cockiness to me. I kind of probably ramped that up a little bit.
You were charming.
I was. I don't know in whose eyes, but
you had charm.
Okay, so I just wanted to catch Coach I's eye.
Yes, of course.
And I eventually wanted to be the apple of his eye, and I eventually became the apple of his eye. Of course. My senior year, or maybe my junior year.
Well, let's talk about that whole process at Beechwood. We're going to take a commercial break, though.
Okay, great.
Okay. Hey, I want to welcome our newest sponsor, Antonio Nicholson from Nicholson Law. This former state place winner from Solon High School and captain of the Cleveland State University team is an attorney that handles criminal cases, everything from minor misdemeanors to felonies of the first degree. He also does custody, civil, and personal injury cases, and he's been doing this for 6 years. He's a former public defender, and his motto is always and forever protector of the people. He wants to offer a 10% discount to all athletes former and present, if they retain his services. Nicholson Law at 216-774-4774. That's 216-774-4774. Antonio Nicholson, Nicholson Law. All right, so we talked about the Coach I and the Beechwood experience, being in this room that made you, really not only excited, but anticipatory about being one of those guys, right?
I felt that I was part of that system.
That's awesome.
And I not only did I
grooming
feel
to be
that,
one of those guys.
Okay, so that's the key, that I saw myself as absolutely, I was going to be one of those guys in the future, and hopefully not the too distant future.
Sure.
So, the biggest problem with me was physically, I was an 82-pound freshman. Right. When you interviewed Brian Zide, you mentioned that I was an 88-pound freshman. I was an 82-pound freshman. Okay. So I really wasn't even allowed to wrestle in JV matches because you had to be within 7 pounds of the weight class.
Sure, yeah.
But, they don't really take the scale down to see how far down you were. If you were under 98 pounds, you were okay, So I wrestled in those matches.
Back in the day. Back in the day,
right.
Today they do.
Today they do?
Yeah.
Well, because you get a digital readout.
Yep.
So, so the situation was that I saw this coach that I just was in awe of.
Right.
And he was such a firecracker.
Right.
I mean, he was such a strong, competitive man.
Right.
And he was also strategic, which I really loved because for whatever reason, there are people in this world who can go out and they can be completely physical wrestlers.
Yes.
I think my brother was an example of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Dominant. I mean, physically dominant.
The only intellect that he put into his match, and this is not meant as a knock to him, because the only intellect he put into his match was during training, what he would learn. Right. And then he always had his ears open to you and I when we were coaching.
Sure.
Right. And so, but other than that, he was just a physical body that was doing everything that he worked so hard at.
Sure.
Yep. And there's people that go in, I think Michael Linsker would be a good example, that is a much more intellectual wrestler, much more cerebral in his approach. And I think I was in that category as well. And so to see that Coach I was a coach that had a strategy, and Graham Coghill and Ed Goving may have had that, but I didn't see it. I wasn't ever behind the scenes.
Right.
But with Coach I, you could see it. It was open, and he was very smart in the way he approached things.
Yes.
And so I loved that, and I just wanted to be so close to him and learn from him and hear everything. So when I got into that high school, I just was his shadow, right? I don't even know if he realized, but I would just stand next to him. I listened to every story he told. I still remember the stories. I've asked him when I was a kid, I would ask him about every single state qualifier.
Sure.
And what happened when he got to state.
Yep.
Right? Tell me what happened in districts.
And he had that memory.
Oh, his memory.
Recollection.
It's incredible. To this day, it's still incredible.
It is. Yeah.
And so I think that also helped create a relationship between us because he saw that I wanted to know. And so, he was the most important figure in my life for those 4 years.
Sure.
And, including my parents.
Okay.
Right? Because they could tell me something and he could tell me the same thing. If he told me, I'm doing it. And if they tell me, there's going to be a fight if I don't want to do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so he had such a way of relating to me.
Right.
And, I was a mischievous kid. I could find, I could create trouble and walk away and let it happen. And then I could from a distance watch it and, think, wow.
And enjoy it.
Right.
Enjoy it. Exactly.
It's a very fun way to go through high school.
That's right.
But Coach I knew me inside and out.
Yes.
And he would have a look on his face. He would ask me for an explanation to something, right?
Yes.
And I would give it to him, and I could see in his eyes if he was buying or not buying it, and he could look in my eyes and know if it was worth buying.
I love it. So when did he transform you?
And
how did he transform you?
So I just think, he was such a trusted friend.
Sure.
That I just, he didn't judge me.
Right.
And personally, I think he's always had a special place in his heart for the more challenging kids.
I agree. He liked people that had personality.
He did.
Had their own unique personality. And kids gravitated to him because of that. And we had a myriad of different personalities.
We did.
So to say to that, I think you're astute in saying that's why you guys bonded.
Right. So the stories he told me, they all fired me up. He told me when I was a junior and I seemed like a lock to make state, he was telling me a story about Mark Haywald on his way down to state that they heard this song, This Is It by Kenny Loggins.
Okay.
And Coach I turned to him and said, this is it.
Yeah.
Right? And he started telling me this whole story about how that became like a mantra over the weekend, you know. And
I love it.
And so we were driving down to state. I didn't make state my junior year, but we were driving down to state my senior year.
Okay.
And that comes on the radio. And we actually, as soon as we hit Columbus, that song came on the radio. And Mark, at the time, was the only kid that made it only as a senior and won it as a senior.
Yeah, right.
And I was facing the same circumstances.
Sure.
So, you know, we pretty much penned myself in as the state champ.
State champ, exactly.
But he had such a deep belief in me and such a love. He exuded so much love and confidence.
Yes.
You know, as a sophomore.
Do you feel that there was a transference there?
I would say there was a turning point.
Okay. But did he transfer that love to you?
Oh, absolutely.
So you felt that. So it was a symbiotic relationship, right?
All the time.
Okay.
Right? And the fact that I could interrupt him, not exactly, you know, like we think of an interruption, but I can interrupt him talking to other teachers, and he would rather hear from me than them.
Gotcha.
Right? He would leave that conversation to come spend time with me.
Sure.
I don't think any adult really realizes how much of an impact that makes on a kid.
Of course.
Because you just feel that someone believes in you and loves you. And
I think we chatted about that when we became coaches together.
Yeah, for sure.
How we had to really be very cognizant of what we're saying to these kids and not be flip and take it relatively seriously, because some of these words could be life-changing.
Right. And you don't realize it.
You don't realize it.
My sophomore year, I had to wrestle Mark Atkins.
Oh,
who was a 2-time state champ from Richmond Heights and part of the family that was, you know, one of the great families.
Sure.
And Mark and I had missed each other in 7th grade and in 8th grade and in 9th grade.
Gotcha.
And we were supposed to wrestle each other each of those years, and something happened each time, and we just never wrestled. So here we were both in the starting lineup for the first time, and, you know, the Richmond Heights Beechwood rivalry was, you know,
brutal.
That was it.
Yeah,
that was it.
It was.
So we were going to start off the show. And so I came downstairs, and, you know, I didn't have to check my weight because I was a 92-pound sophomore wrestling 98 pounds. And Mark was small too, but not as small. And so I was walking, and I heard Coach I speaking with Ronnie in the coach's office.
Okay.
Ronnie Madow.
Sure.
Of blessed memory.
God bless him. Yeah.
And so I stood by the door, and I eavesdropped.
All right.
And they were figuring out how the match was going to play out, because we had never beaten Richmond Heights, and it was always close.
Right.
And some of our studs always beat their studs.
Right.
And some of their studs always beat our studs. And so they were going match by match. So they didn't start at 98 pounds. They started at 105.
Okay.
And then they came back to me, and Ronnie said, so what do you think is going to happen with Peters and Atkins? Mm-hmm. Oh, and I wanted to hear the answer to this, but I was afraid, you know.
Yeah.
And Coach I'll never forget his words. He said, I just don't think Scott will lose to him. And when I heard that, because I was not going to lose to him, right? I barged in, and I said, you're damn right I'm not going to lose to him. I said, there's no way I'm going to lose to him. And he said, I believe in you. And he really did believe me, because he didn't know I was standing there.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
And I didn't lose to him. I tied him.
Oh, okay.
You know, there was 9 seconds left in the first period.
Yes.
Right. And we're on our feet.
Yes.
And Coach I looks at me, you know, I look over the corner, and he says, don't do anything stupid.
Okay.
Right. So I thought that meant try a headlock.
Oh.
So I try a headlock, and I slip the headlock, and he takes me down.
Oh my gosh.
And I look over at him, and he's got that look on his face like, well, that isn't
something.
exactly what I meant there, buddy. Yeah. You know, and there was a lesson in that. Don't ever motivate somebody by telling them something in the negative. Yeah. Motivate somebody. Now, again, he'll take this as I'm knocking him. I mean, everything I was in wrestling was because of him.
Of course. You know, we're much more mindful today. We know by the mistakes of the past. Right. So that's what we're learning today.
So there was another episode that happened. It must have been my junior year, and I'll tell this story quickly. But
sure,
it's one of the great moments in my life.
Right? That's what we want.
And so
transformative moments.
We had a janitorial crew at the high school that I had no use for, and they had less use for me.
Okay.
They were these big, sloppy guys. One of them hated me.
Okay.
And his hatred was only outdone by mine towards him. And so I walked to the...
That wasn't Tennis Shoe Lou, was it?
It wasn't Tennis Shoe Lou.
Okay.
Tennis Shoe Lou was a dream compared to Russ.
Okay.
I won't tell you what he was called. Russ the what? It was. I don't use that language anymore. But
indeed.
But that was his official nickname. So I knock on the teacher's lounge door, to see if Coach I would hang out with me during lunch, which he was always willing to do.
Of course.
And which meant he had to come away from Max Vermillion and Herb
Oh,
Smolka.
yeah,
And right,
yeah.
I knock on the door and Russ answers the door.
Oh,
That is not who I'm looking forward to. This
Right.
big, he was probably 240 pounds of all belly.
Oh, boy.
And so he opens the door and he goes, "What do you want, Peters?"
Oh,
Right?
boy.
So I said, "Is Coach I in there?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "You mean Dominic?"
Oh,
I
boy.
said, "Yeah, I mean Dominic." He closes the door. He goes, "Dominic, that a-hole Peters
Oh,
is
boy.
out there for you, right?"
Oh, boy.
I'm just like, man, I should just take this guy. He was a huge man, though. So, but I still would have. Coach I comes to the door.
Yes.
And he goes, "How you doing, Scott?" And I go, "How you doing, Dominic?" And in 1 second,
Oh, boy.
he whacks me across the face
Oh, my gosh.
with such strength.
Oh, my
He knocked me 3 feet back.
Oh, my gosh.
And he comes out and he shoves me up against the wall.
Yeah.
And he said, all 130 pounds of him.
Yeah.
And he says, "Don't you ever disrespect me by calling me by my first name in front of adults again."
Wow. That's
So-
old school, baby. That's Collinwood.
Now, I want to tell you something.
Yeah.
I mean, today,
Yeah.
could you imagine?
Yeah, you'd be in jail or whatever. You know?
But let me tell you what a lesson that was in how to treat adults. What nerve I had to address him by his first name, even though I was just mimicking this
Sure.
other guy. But the point is, I was also mimicking an adult.
Yes.
I was mocking another adult. That lesson has stayed with me today. Later, years later, I was grown and married and with children and sitting on the Beechwood School Board.
Yes.
I had trouble referring to him as Dominic because I was scared I was going to get cracked again.
So you're a 40-year-old guy
Right,
and you're like
right.
waiting
I'm
for
like-
that left
I'm
hand.
like, "Coach, how you doing?"
What's up? A left hand.
So I was juggling the situation where I never wanted to look like I still looked up to him because there were decisions that involved him
Yes.
while I was on the board, and
Yes.
I always wanted him to be favorable. But if everybody knew he was my idol,
Yes.
right,
Of course.
then it
Yeah.
would look,
jaundice the
yeah, it
opinion.
would.
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
So I walked this fine line of saying, "Hi, Dominic," as
that's
quietly under my breath as I could. But today I go back to Coach. As soon as I came off the board, I started calling him Coach again.
Yes.
I still have so much love in my heart for him. And so he transitioned me from boyhood to manhood.
We've got so much to talk about with Scott. We're going to end our first 2-part episode, and we're going to come back next week with episode 2. So I want to thank Scott Peters for this part of his young life and what transformed him from boy to man, that we are all blood. I want to share my thought of the day with you. Iron through fire makes steel. Welcome the fire. Hey guys, I want to thank Affinity Whole Health and the owner, Brian Zide. He started this company to get you feeling like you were in your prime. You can reach this company at feelgreatcleveland.com. Founded obviously by a former wrestler athlete and his partner, who's also a former wrestler and athlete. The whole goal for this is to get you feeling like you're in your prime, but also helps you with muscle definition and strength, increased libido, increased energy and drive, increased mental acuity, obviously increases your confidence if you get all those, and increases recovery time from workouts. If you like all those things and you want all those things, check them out at feelgreatcleveland.com. Thank you again, Brian Zide and Affinity Whole Health.